Hello and welcome to another painting video. In this video, I'll be painting the Spoilpox Scrivener, possibly one of the most bizarre demons GW has ever produced. Look at that mouth, it's hilarious. Let me show you how I painted him up. First, I want to tackle the skin. Parts of the body I paint with a watered down Steel Legion drab. Just add random patches or try a pattern, whatever suits you. Then I cover the parts that are unpainted with Plague Bearer flesh. The part below the trunk area I base coat with Xandri dust. This to get a lighter tone than the rest. Now I shade the entire body with Seraphim Sepia. To highlight the skin, I'll be doing a series of dry brushes. First, I dry brush the brown parts with Xandri dust. And the green parts with Ogryn Camo. Next, I highlight the brown parts with Karak Stone. And the green with Creek Khaki. If the dry brushes overlap, that won't be a problem. This will all add to blending the skin tones together. Now I glaze several patches of skin with Lamenter's Yellow to get a nice sickly yellow tone. All the boils and pustules I paint with Iyanden Yellow. And dot with Screaming Skull to make them pop. Literally. With a couple of contrast paints, washes and dry brushes, we already have an interesting skin going on for the Spoilpox. Let's paint some gore next. First, I base coat the gory entrails and any wounds I can find with the Voluptuous Pink. Then, I shade the gore with Carroburg Crimson. I also make sure to hit the surrounding skin so we can start making it look bruised. I repeat this process with Druchii Violet. The gore gets a highlight of pink horror. Any fatty tissue that is showing gets a base coat of Averland Sunset. And a highlight of Ushabti Bone. Lastly, I shade the fatty tissue with Seraphim Sepia. I do enjoy painting gore, and with a couple of washes you can get some really icky results real quick. The gore is not completely done, but we'll get to that later. Let's focus on that weird mouth first. First, the tongue. This gets a base coat of Voluptuous Pink. Then, a shade of Druchii Violet. Now to layer on some highlights. First I use Pink Horror. Then Emperor's Children. And I end with a mix of Emperor's Children and Palette Switch Flesh. The tongue is now done. On with the teeth, which I base coat with Ushabti Bone. I shade them with Skeleton Horde. The lips get a coat of Xarius Purple. And a shade of Nuln Oil. Then, to layer on highlights. First, I use Genestealer Purple. Then Slaanesh Grey. And I finish with a mix of Slaanesh Grey and Palette Switch Flesh. That trunk and mouth are completely bonkers. I love it. Let's take a look at his eyes next. The three eyes all get a base coat of Blood Angel Red. The big eye in the middle gets an iris of Iyanden Yellow. I carefully paint it on with a circling motion. The pupil is painted with Abaddon Black. Just a dot will suffice. Then I add a dot of white scar to simulate the reflection on the eyeball. Finally, I shade the bags under his eyes with Athonian Camoshade. The horns, claws, and Plaguesword all get a coat of Incubi Darkness. Then a shade of known oil. The first highlight is Kabalite Green. And the second highlight is Ogrun Camo. This is a quick way to paint some eldritch looking Plagueswords. We'll be adding one more special ingredient to these at the end of the video. First, I'll be painting the Quill. I want to make the Quill stand out. Therefore, I paint the upper part with pink horror. And the lower part with Sotek green. Next, I paint the decoration in the middle with Uruk flesh. Now I'm going to shade the entire quill with known oil. The pink area gets a highlight of Emperor's Children. The blue part gets a highlight of Temple Guard Blue. And the green decoration gets a highlight of Skarsnik Green. Lastly, I coat the tip of the quill with Black Templar. I also add this to the tips of the vein. Yeah, I had to look that one up. Did you know the quill is supposed to be a feather plucked off a tortured Lord of Change? Some little background lore for you there. Hence the bright colors, and it will make it stand out nicely. I make sure the huge roll of parchment is nicely coated with Wraithbone. Then I shade the entire scroll with Skeleton Horde. Now I'm going to pick out all the edges and raised areas with Screaming Skull. This can be quite time consuming, but it'll be worth the effort. The raised decorations on the scroll I carefully paint with Black Templar. I needed about 2 coats. Finally, I color in some of the drawings on the scroll with Biel-Tan Green. Because I use Biel-Tan Green, a transparent paint, you will still see the dark outlines, and it gives an almost eerie green glow. Now let's go on to some final details. The scroll holder and the little medallion hanging from the entrails get a coat of Iron Warriors. Then I coat them again with Balthasar Gold. I shade them with Agrax Earthshade. And highlight them with Rune Fang Steel. Lastly, I add Nihilakh Oxide to create that verdigris effect. The rope tied to his waist gets a coat of Wildwood contrast paint. And the leather straps holding on to the Plaguesword get a coat of Gore-Grunta Fur. The little bag on his belt and the wrappings on his arm get a coat of Corn Red. Then I shade them with Druchii Violet and highlight them with Pink Horror. It's good to add a few different spot colors on the model. This will help differentiate the model from a distance, and it helps with the overall aesthetic. The little Nurgling, chewing on that parchment, thought we'd missed him, but no. I coat him with Cadian Fleshtone. Then I shade him with Averland Sunset. And carefully dry brush Kislev flesh on the Nurgling. The teeth get a coat of Ushabti bone. And a shade of Skeleton Horde. The eye I paint with Blood Angel Red contrast paint. The horn I paint with Black Templar and highlight with Thunderhawk Blue. Now I go over the entire model and add blood for the blood god to all the wounds and parts of the skin. Make sure you have very little on your paintbrush, so it won't be an overkill of glossy red. Finally, I add Nurgle's Rot through the wounds, skin and Plaguesword to bless this model as Nurgle likes to see it. And here we have the Spoilpox Scrivener, ready to write down all the plagues and to scream at those poor plague bearers in front of him. Absolute bonkers model and such a joy to paint. The Maggotkin range of Age of Sigmar is my favorite, and it's models like these that make it so. Next up, I'll be having a look at another one of these models, Horticus Limux, the demon snail with his plague bearer rider. Stay tuned. Also, look me up on Instagram, where I post pictures of my projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.